Hello everyone, it's Victoria Fenton here, and before we start this episode in our typical way, I just wanted to thank everyone for being on board and with us through all the changes and the pivots that the Unveil team, the Alethea team, have been through in the last seemingly very short space of time. This episode today is a really huge one. We started with a very simple topic and it kind of went all over the place. So recording an introduction is rather tricky. However, this is a really good insight into the way I think about health and wellness and coaching and coping strategies and the nervous system and all of the things that we go through. Brace and I get really personal in this episode. We actually share that the genesis of this recording happened because we were talking for over 2 hours about our own coping strategies. And the majority of this episode is all about sabotage. Where do we sabotage ourselves? How do we sabotage ourselves? And more importantly, why do we sabotage ourselves? What are the patterns that are at play underneath the moments when we feel the freeze, the panic, the runaway, the instinct to sabotage? Realistically, all of this is about protection. But what are you protecting yourself from? Is it a real threat or is it perceived? And does it even matter? This episode really does go everywhere. This is more than the Unveil segues. So be prepared for a deep and meaningful thought process about improv and acting and what it means to be an actor and who makes a good actor. And all of the things from functional medicine to deep explorations of consciousness and contemplations on what it really means to be a human being. Yes, really. Enjoy this episode. And the one thing to say is that the Alethea Group website is not live. I do mention that it might be during this episode, and yet I did not get there this weekend because, as is my way, I wanted it to be even better than it was going to be had I pushed it out for today. So it will be there. All of the Unveil Academy stuff is already live, and we are really excited to bring you the workshop in July and the launch of our Coach Training Academy in September. Registrations are open and available now, and you can get on this course early and get the secret summer school Gene Keys exploration with myself in August. All right, with that, a rather longer introduction than usual, but welcome to the Unveil Podcast.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brace Harris.
And my name is Victoria Fenton.
And I just interrupted her right as she was about to drink some water.
You did.
Yes, we are.
Unveil. Can I drink now, Brace? Do I have permission?
Absolutely. Take that lovely sip. Let it wash over you. There we are. Hydrate. Make sure those vocal cords are ready to go.
Indeed. So I was trying to do that really loudly. I apologize, podcast listeners, if I've just offended you, but I know it really irritates Brace because he literally spent 20 minutes telling me about how much like drinking noises irritate him yesterday. So I was literally...
Yeah, I have this weird thing where smacking food or like...
Wait, no, like Brace, don't go into a stress response just because we're talking about it.
Yes, I'm just gonna slowly back out of that. Out of that.
So, just to say, listeners, this is the second attempt of our podcast today. Brace and I have already spent 2 hours talking to one another about all the things that we're going to get into in some detail. But so we're a bit giddy on our own supply at the moment. But firstly, a few little updates. So for pointless, practical, tedious reasons, I am removing the application form from our coach training curricula. The reason being that I need to do some tech gubbins and we don't need to have an application form because there's no eligibility criteria. So you can just buy the course and then we'll send you the form afterwards to fill in. So we just gather a bit of information. So if you're interested, head to the unveilacademy.com website and hit admissions on the top. And you can, hopefully when this is released, just purchase the course. Just to say as well, we do have some people signing up for our workshop that's on the 16th and 17th of July. But just to be super clear, if we don't get enough people on the workshop that makes it worthwhile our doing, and that isn't very many people, but just a few more than a couple, then I won't make Brace travel all the way to Austin, even though I'd love to see him. There's no real need to create a workshop if it's not going to be easily attainable for people in the date that we've set it, and we will continue and do it at another date, or we will work around for people. So just to put that out there.
Yeah. Recruit.
Yeah.
Everyone, because you're going to want me there. You're going to want me there. Victoria is amazing and fantastic, but when she has her court jester with her, it is a riot, let me tell you.
It is also better. So these are 2 days, 9 to 5. And I don't have Tony Robbins level stamina. So like having my wingman there to support and to just give you a bit of variety. Like I'm great, but I'm samey. Like having Brace to like do some practical stuff will be awesome. So if you really want to be on there and you haven't registered yet and you're just like, I can't yet for XYZ reason, there's only 4 weeks to go. So send us a message, let us know that you're interested and you're definitely planning to come, and we just need to know, because obviously Brace is going to be traveling when his wife is 8 months pregnant. So that has to be done under some consideration. So with those updates, I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the Alethea group website should be live. If it is, there'll be a link in the show notes.
If it is.
I have no idea anymore. I'm like,
it's always a mystery, you guys. So
well, particularly as like when we started our chat today, I was like, I think I might completely rebuild it yet again. And then you were like, no, you won't, Victoria. No, you won't. So.
Ready for today's
I'm ready.
Meaty topic. And this topic was kind of just very present for the both of us. Like Victoria was saying, we spent the first 2 hours of our meeting today kind of reflecting on our own ways of doing this to ourselves. We're talking about sabotage today, why we sabotage ourselves.
And Brace is highly accurate. We literally spent 2 hours trying to work out. Firstly, I was waffling through all of my stuff. And the sabotage mechanisms that I have. And then the similarities, but differences in what Brace's patterns are. And actually, they've been very alive for us both this week, just in one thing and another. And this is the thing. And it's like, we're in the work, we do the work, we teach the work, but we still have this stuff come up. Like we still
have to practice,
right. And we still face these kind of realizations of, oh, that's me doing me again.
Fun place to be.
Right. Well, and actually I was kind of, that's the other update. So summer school is going to happen for people who come on the workshop and register for the course before August. And the summer school is going to be on gene keys, 2 90-minute sessions with me going into the beautiful and wonderful transmission that is the gene keys. The reason that this is contextual to the comment that I was about to make is because I was trying to think about how to do this last night. And I was kind of thinking about my own gene key, my life's work, which will make sense if you come on the summer school. And it's the 33, which is all about forgetting. And I was kind of doing a mini lecture to myself in my head. Yes, listeners, I do this. I plan things in my head and I'm like talking to people. And I was thinking, it's a huge theme for me, and actually for you, Brace, because you've got you've got the same gene key in a different place. But it's like I have to forget to remember. So it's part of my process to absolutely lose my way in a sabotage pattern or a one of my typical things yet again, to find myself again. And every time I do, there's another layer, there's another nuance, there's another insight, there's another set of wisdom, and there's another descending into truth that happens as you remember, but the forgetting is part of the point. So yeah, just to say and preface all of this, that if you resonate deeply with all that we share today, so do we.
It's a little bit no pain, no gain kind of thing. Great.
So why don't you give your little crazy overview of what is actually happening when people sabotage, Brace?
So when we sabotage, there is definitely a very strong reason why we do it. And mostly there's some sort of payoff. I mean, that's one of the most powerful questions that we can ask a client in coaching. It's like, what's the payoff? If the client is like, oh, why do I always, do this and it messes up the situation? Why do I always react in this way and potentially a relationship? Why do I always, send too many texts, or why do I do this? You're actually protecting yourself and keeping yourself safe.
And that's interesting.
Seems kind of counterintuitive.
And let's just highlight and double click on that, because that's three different things.
Yeah.
So you started with there's a payoff, then you said you protect yourself, and then you said keep yourself safe. And
right.
That's three different things, but they're all interconnected. But coaching is very tricksy, because sometimes coaches can ask them, well, what's the payoff question? And they'll get a very specific answer. It'll be, well, I at least know that I've done all that I can for the date in the text message example.
Right.
Super specific, but that as an end point is not satisfactory for someone like ourselves as a coach, because
Correct.
we're like, well, why do you need to know that you've done all you can? And then the answer could be, well, because then I know that if she doesn't respond, it's not my fault. It's like, why do you need it not to be your fault?
Exactly.
So there's so many layers, and this, I know it makes you sound like an annoying 3-year-old, but if you can ask yourselves why questions, your brain has to find an answer. It might not find the right one, but that's not really the point. The point is inquiry. And if you're starting with what's the payoff, great first question. And to all our potential coaches and people interested, we will go into these kind of how to ask question stuff in our coach training, because it's super important, but it's also super important to know where to stop. And having an answer that's a specific, that is anything other than it keeps me safe, is not a stopping point. It's like, because again, back to our example, it's like, because then I'll know it's, well, why do you need to know it's not your fault? Well, because if it's my fault, I feel bad about myself. Well, why do you not want to feel bad about yourself? Well, because then I feel ashamed. Well, why don't you want to feel ashamed? Because I don't feel safe when I feel ashamed. And it's all any avenue down that track. It doesn't make much difference as to how you get there. But the end point is always to protect myself from a threat, whether real or perceived. And that's the interesting thing. It's like, if you look at sabotage, it removes you from a situation, typically. In fact, almost always. The whole element of sabotage takes you out of somewhere. It's like, if you fail at the final hurdle, you're not in the final. Like, you don't have to cross the finish line. So it's so interesting when we look at the problems we develop. And I used to do this a lot with my people with food issues, developed from any reason, whether that's actually kind of psychological, emotional eating disorders, or food problems with physiological reasons. It's like, the beauty of a food problem is it takes you out of so many social situations, because you can't eat in public. And you just go, well, what's the payoff there? And it's like, there's so many. And it's interesting, if you look, and if you can't get an answer to what's the payoff specifically, you can ask the, what does this help me avoid question? Because that's also another really useful one. Does that resonate with you, like that? What does this help me avoid thought process?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And ultimately, and correct me if I'm kind of backpedaling a little bit, but what does it help me avoid? A situation where I feel unsafe.
Right.
And then that gets to take you into a whole other layered reasons of, okay, why do I feel unsafe? What from my past,
Well, and I want to be really, like, I want to lay out the science before, and we're going to talk about what we've been talking about, because I think it's relevant to give you actual personal explanations, as much as we feel comfortable doing so, right? But let's lay up some of the science, because this, if we do it from a cognitive perspective, you could end up looking for, oh, what was the specific past experience that made me do X, Y, Z? And then you can get into narratives, and we even did with our own stuff of like, oh, but that was my fault. That wasn't anyone. So the science behind this safety mechanism The Unveil Podcast is about to play its broken record and say it's all to do with the nervous system. So we are very intellectual as human beings, and we think that our intellect sets us apart from animals. And in so many ways, it does. There are elements of our consciousness, particularly self-reflected consciousness, with language as well. Like, all these things are additional elements that are very human and very kind of progressive and evolutionary, progress, that's a terrible way to sound a podcast. Yeah, progressive, same thing. But everything that we are has to fall back on the baseline of our animalistic nature, because it is our animalistic nature that is primed and encoded with how to keep us safe. So when it comes to the reality of what is trying to keep you safe in these sabotage situations, this is the reason why we sabotage. Because if the conscious mind was trying to keep you safe, you would intellectually work something different out. You would like talk your way through it. Like, if it was the conscious mind that was going, oh, hang on, I need to be safe in this situation, the end result will be different. Because it's our animalistic nature, and it's that default sense of, oh, I don't feel safe. Like, the only way to do it is to create a situation in which forward motion is no longer guaranteed. So you sabotage yourself from ending up at the end point physiologically, oftentimes, so that you don't actually have to take the risk. And there's so many examples that people have of this in their own lives, in terms of what they end up doing and the behavior patterns that they use as their kind of sabotage mechanism. But ultimately, what you're looking at is there is a risk that to your being and to your body feels beyond what is possible and safe and healthy, or even just safe for you in this moment in time, given what signals you're receiving. I'm pretty convinced that we as human beings are only ever supposed to see our sabotage patterns when we're supposed to deal with them, really see them. So it's easier for us to beat ourselves up about the things we do than it is to face them. So it's easy for us to just recognize that we know that when we're in X situation, we will always freeze or scupper ourselves. And these kind of responses, and I want to talk a little bit about the ways we sabotage ourselves as well. But these kind of responses they're easier to blame ourselves for than it is to actually sometimes do the recognition work about understanding what's underneath the surface. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes. If I didn't speak because I felt like I would say something wrong or look silly, or this has happened in the past where I've been in a situation with a professional who's much more educated on a certain topic, and to speak up or to put my 2 cents in may be considered disrespectful. It could be considered absolutely the wrong thing, which would reveal my ignorance of the situation. And for me, looking ignorant in a situation, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that, is it's better just to not say anything at all. It's like, what's the old phrase, and I'm butchering this, it's like, a man can look wise if he keeps his mouth shut, but as soon as he opens his mouth, we know
how stupid he is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think that is a perfect example of not necessarily potentially sabotage, but a survival kind of strategy where it's like, okay, I need to continue to belong to the group. I need to continue, for me, to feel like I am smart enough, good enough, enough, period, So it's better for me to keep my mouth shut, because if I open my mouth, then I may give myself evidence of why I never should speak up to begin with, which would only compound the situation.
And also you may give other people evidence to believe that you're not enough. Not that they would, but in your perspective. And other people believing you're not enough is not safe.
Right. And it's almost like I don't want to go back into that trauma response as well. It's like I don't want to feel that again. I don't want to be, because for me, that's what happens. Like I go deeper and deeper and deeper into I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I knew I shouldn't have said anything. I knew I shouldn't have spoken up.
It's interesting.
And I use that as evidence to beat myself over the head, which drives me deeper into this dark space.
And it's interesting what you just like highlighted, because this reveals how complex we are as human beings. It's like the sabotage response that we're talking about is a trauma response in and of itself. It's I'm gonna fight, flight, freeze, appease, although sabotage doesn't necessarily come with the appease, in this trauma thing. But sabotage can also be the way we avoid going into a deeper trauma response, and like actually going into the place where we know we feel uncomfortable. So human beings are flipping complicated. And I think that as I was just saying to Grace before we started recording, it's like we're all just a collection of patterns. It's we get to continually evaluate which of those we choose to keep or not. And that doesn't mean, and I really should caveat everything I say when I start or on this podcast at some point, it doesn't mean getting rid of the maladaptive patterns better, keeping them worse. It means your whole being will have capacity to release patterns at different times, but it isn't safe for you to release all of them just because you suddenly go, oh, do you know what? I don't want those patterns anymore. It's not possible to just release all of them like that, but it's also not safe to. So this isn't the goal is to release every pattern as quickly as I possibly can. The actual goal is self-aware progression through coming home to oneself. And being home with oneself isn't pattern free. It's just sitting in a place of peace and ease and flow within as much innateness as we want, as we can access, and patterns that we've acquired over time that actually have advantages, multiple layers of advantages. Like patterns are not just negative. So it's like we would probably universally say that on the surface, sabotage has negative consequences if we're looking from an external metrics perspective. But if we look from a your safety, your human being perspective, sabotage is successful 100% of the time because it keeps you away from the thing that you don't want to do. It's really good and really like sensible. It's an intelligent response from your organism to go, instead of to say something. It's sorry, that's terrible for audio medium. I literally just was like freezing and like not saying anything, actively not saying anything. It's so brilliant of our system to have these ways of getting us out of things. And sometimes the sabotage can often be the freeze response, or it can be the, let me back up and clarify. So here's the science bit. Our stress responses, and I'm going to keep it out of the terminology because it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this podcast, are stress-based responses, and we've spoken about this before, but we have basically 4 almost directions in which we move when we feel under threat. And again, we said this hundreds of times, threat, whether real or perceived. Grace's example just now, like we don't know whether him saying something in that situation with a professional had any real threat associated with it at all, but in his perception, it absolutely did. So it's enough for it to trigger the stress response. And so we have 4 directions, and I like to think of them as directions because it helps you think somatically. So the ones that we're familiar with tend to be fight and flight. So fight is a very forward motion. It's a very attacking, it's aggressive. There is an a forward trajectory where you're about to go to battle with the thing that is the threatening thing. Flight is an away direction. It's actually you're running away, and you will turn and run. And that is a very kind of like, get me out of the situation. And everything is regressive within the kind of energy system. Freeze, I guess it's not a direction particularly, but it is static. It's like, I don't know what to do. And almost all of your faculties dry up. So any intelligence, any wisdom, like just thinking again of Brace's example in terms of like saying something to a professional to add your 2 cents. It's like, suddenly the wisdom's not there. You don't have access to that cognitive brain juices. Like, I suddenly don't have any words, all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of a stress response. And then there is fawn or appease, and it's very difficult to say in an American accent, but fawn, as in fawning, is it's a very, very human social mimicry response, which means I'll just ingratiate myself into these people and make them like me for some reason, because that will keep me safe. Because if I can just keep them on side, tribally I'm safe. And so that's almost a kind of collapsing function direction. It's like, if I just keep everything here, it's fine. So when you're thinking of sabotage, what you're typically doing is heading into somatically one of these energetic states. And you typically in normal human society wouldn't actually punch someone in the face, run away, like look like a deer in headlights, or, you know, just start baking cakes for everyone. But the subtle cues are always there. So there is this kind of like startle response for the freezing. It's like, and everything becomes kind of still, and you do become almost like a deer in headlights. And if you're micro looking at cues, your pupils will slightly dilate and all those kinds of things. None of this is the way you sabotage. It's your trick and your signal to sabotage, and it's the reason why you do. So typically with, you know, Brace is an actor, like was an actor. Sorry, I apologize. Brace will always be an actor to me. And we were talking about being on stage and why do people choke, and why do people, it's that pressure of performance that, you know, leads to, and I always used to when I was singing and when I was doing like musicals, when it was like there was a cadence and you would build up to performance week. I get a terrible sore throat in like the week before performance week and tech week. I'd be like, I can't sing, because I've got a really good excuse if I'm a bit rubbish. It's so subtle, but would happen with such frequency that there was no way it was a coincidence.
Oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. I was doing a competition where I had to sing, and all of a sudden I started to get a bit of laryngitis. I even went to the ear, nose, and throat doctor and had vocal nodules that were starting to form. But all of a sudden they were causing an issue when before they weren't an issue.
Me too. Yeah. And, you know, it's a really good excuse for a singer if it's not quite in your key.
Oh, yes.
Just sing better.
Oh, yes. Just sing better. Ouch. Come on.
And it's so funny because, in fact, a colleague of mine said this to me this morning. It's like, the thing that we do that is so horrific to ourselves when we go into these sabotage, stress response stuff, is we justify it. That's the curse of having this self-reflected consciousness. We have a whole list of reasons, like
rationalize
modules, and yeah, and it's just a bit low for me. I'm a soprano, it's a bit low for me. That was literally why. I mean, technically it kind of was. It was very mezzo, but you know, I can sing mezzo. I just needed an excuse because I was scared. I was 16 and I was overweight and it was a chorus line. And so we were dancing around in leotards, and that felt uncomfortable to me, and I felt really unsafe. And I felt really under pressure. And it was a trio, it wasn't just a solo. So the consequences of this were nothing. Like, it was a school musical, nobody cared, except societal reputation, all of that. And I think for me, I'm very precious about my singing, and so it really matters to me. And so the consequences to me felt like life and death. Oh, hello, there's a cue to have a strong response to it. And it's not, are the consequences life and death? It's, do they feel like life and death? I really liked, actually, when I saw a clip of the stuff that we did with Megan the other day, and I was like, she was talking about this kind of, it's life and death, and there's no way from a rational perspective that a school musical when I was like 16 made any difference. But it doesn't matter. And that's why I started this by saying, this isn't about your cognitive rationalization of what's threatening and what do I need to do in this situation, and should I sabotage because it might be scary. It's, what is your body feeling? And the thing about me is, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to develop vocal nodules and have a sore throat. It happened. It actually physically happened. And that, to me, really demonstrates the link between the subtle energetic bodies and the physical body, and between our somatic body and the reality.
And how powerful that relationship is. Like, truly, because I mean, in modern society, we're not really taught how to see that or understand that. And we almost kind of put it way, way, way back on the back burner, if at all, if it's on a burner at all. So for us to, as a society, as people, as individuals, to begin to understand how powerful that relationship is, can really give us a lot of tools and insight into, okay, now you get to empower yourself instead of giving away power or losing power in the relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And our Signals in Your Body Symptoms PDF talks all about this, and I'll put the link in the show notes because I've probably broken that link along with the other side. I've also broken. I'll find it. You
just throw your links on the ground and they just.
I did. Yeah, I'm sorry. But there is this is what it's about. It's like, I actually was talking to a chiropractor about this week, because I started very early on with The Body is the Barometer of the Soul. It's a book. I can't remember the author now, but it's basically going, these are these organs, these are these things, these are these things, the physical body parts, sorry, my words today, physical body parts. If you have symptoms here, it's the barometer of something else that's happening. And to be honest, I think this is reductionist. And this is kind of my big campaign in my own heart at the moment. I have spent my life oscillating from, it's this modality, no, it's this modality, no, it's this modality, no, it's this one. So I've been from, it's all existential, and if I just heal my inner realm, then my body will be absolutely fine, to, it's actually physical. If I can just nail the diet and get the supplements right, my body will be fine, to all the way back to like, oh, it's inner realm, but it's coaching and there's somatics. So it's kind of this physiological plus trauma layer plus nervous system, to where I'm finally trying to hold, which is, it can and is all of these things all at once. And the only question is, in which system do you want to intervene? And it isn't body, mind, emotion, soul. That's really reductionist as a 4-pillar thing. It's very much the actual structural physical body and the organs that you have and the direction and how you're built and all that kind of stuff, like very structural like issues. Then you've got all the kind of signaling issues. That's when you bring in energy stuff. That's when you bring in somatics. That's when you bring in the more kind of subtle energy body, but still affecting the physical. Then you've got all the top-down cognition. So how can the mind, but again, layers back onto the body, the energy body, and then the physical body, but it's all from these beliefs and like narrowing of visions and perspectives from the cognitive lens, which has a knock-on impact on the energy body and the physical body. And then you've got this perspective outwards. So you've got the connection, the socializing to humans, and the reach up to God, and choose any deity like but connection to source, to spirituality, to consciousness and oneness. And how you feel there can directly affect, from the bouncing effect or all through the circles, all the way back to your actual physical, functional, structural form, because they're all interconnected. And so I find it sometimes very difficult to hold that level of holism within the work that I do. But that's my challenge, because it really is all these 4 pillars. It's not, oh goodness, it's all somatics, just because somatics is the thing that everybody's talking about at the moment. And it's all trauma. It's not all trauma. Like, there's a lot of it, but it's not all. She said in a podcast that we're supposed to be doing about sabotage and trauma, Brace, your one job is to keep me on track.
I'm with you.
Right. And this is the thing. It's like, we were talking very specifically about our stuff. And my stuff is, as Brace so perfectly put it, it's like, how can I cover all the bases to keep me safe? And all of those bases include work and internety stuff. It's like, I can joke about the fact that I've broken the links. Do I feel deeply embarrassed that I've broken all the links of all of our websites and keep forgetting? Yes. Do I feel weird about the fact that I actually put something on our website this morning and then it auto posted to Facebook without me remembering and thinking, oh, yes. Does it matter much? No. But covering all the bases. So making sure I've got all the infrastructure right, making sure that my behavior is impeccable so that if anybody comes back at me, there is no repercussions, making sure my contracts are like good so that there's safety and like I can go back to the template of stuff, making sure that I've said the right things to the right people, going back and going over and over and over. Was that word choice right? Not all the time. Absolutely not all the time. Like, we wouldn't have a podcast if I questioned every single word choice. But it's the times when I'm stressed and the times when it feels like I'm unsafe. And yesterday afternoon was a great case in point. We've had a really big week. And it's a really overwhelming period for the Unveil Academy in particular. And then it was just from about 6 o'clock last night, it was just bang, 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 including credit card fraud and, like, just there's the things that you don't need.
Sorry, I didn't mean to buy all those things.
Buy all those things.
That was...
It is when I realized that Brace has my spare credit card today, and I'm like, oh, was it really fraud or was it just Brace spending it up on diet pills made with apple cider vinegar, keto gummies? Apparently, I've been trying to buy. So there's, and it's just bang, 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 and to be really brutally honest, some of the tech infrastructure that we mentioned at the beginning about the removal of the admissions form is because of the complexity of the way I've built our back end. And I hit that problem last night, and I'm messaging Grace going, it's literally not going to work. And we'd already spent like 4.5 hours on the phone to each other yesterday trying to sort stuff out. And so it was just, and so I go out for a walk and I'm trying to fathom it. And I see a scorpion, of course, in the midst of my angry deers and like poisonous snakes. And I see a scorpion and I'm like, oh my God, what does this mean? What does it mean about me? Like, what's the spiritual meaning of all of this? And I sent a text message to a friend and I was like, oh my God, have I used the right word? Have I used the wrong word? Oh no, oh my God, how are they going to interpret that? I mean, and it was a 1-sentence text message. And so this is how we started today, because this is me sabotaging myself by me contriving perfection and contriving my language, the way I show up, how I need to be. Did that email sound right? Particularly when I'm trying to get something, or like, it's not being me, it's not natural, but it is myself in a stress response, and it's ultimately sabotaging. And I feel like there are ways, there's directions to this. And the reason I wanted to talk about mine is because mine is, I'm in a stress pattern that is ultimately sabotaging. It isn't, I'm going to sabotage myself to protect myself from stress necessarily. Whereas I think your patterns are a little bit more like, I'm going to sabotage myself so I don't feel the discomfort. And we can go both directions.
Well, it's, as you're talking,
Don't
I'm like
laugh
reflecting
at me,
on my, well, no, I'm laughing at myself because I was reflecting on everything that you were saying, and I was applying it to the way I move through my life. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do the same thing, but in very different ways.
Yeah.
According to my strategies, to my traumas, to my protection mechanisms.
And your history. Like, you don't have my
Right.
history. And we spent a long time today talking about the differences in our history. And it's really easy to be in relationship with me and to discount your own history because mine's been like, the polite word would be clusterfuck of stuff. But it doesn't mean that Brace hasn't had his own little clusterfuck of stuff. Sorry, I interrupted, but your history. Tell us.
No, well, well, shoot fire. Like, I've lost my train of, I lost my train of thought. No, it's good, because everything that you're saying was totally relevant and really landed. So one of the things that occurred to me while you were speaking was something that happens to me that's very unnatural, and it's something that people have pointed out my entire life, but they haven't helped me figure out what it is, which only compounds my confusion about, why can't I figure this out? What's my malfunction? I've said that, what's my malfunction? I've said it to my wife, like, why? I'm naturally what seems to be a very outgoing, very open, very loving, not really afraid to be in front of people. I've done stage my entire life. And there are just these really natural or these environments where I feel very comfortable and natural. But then there are situations in which my saboteur patterns will come forward, in which I cannot perform in those situations. All of a sudden, it's like my realm of genius is almost completely gone, and people are like, what is going on? Why can't you perform now all of a sudden? And then I'm like, I don't know. Why can't you perform now all of a sudden, Brace?
Well,
this is what
like,
you do.
Well,
and it's like, it's so powerful. The sabotage patterns and techniques are so powerful that they literally take away all of my natural ability in order to keep me safe. So they're willing to go to extremes to make sure that I am safe, even taking me out of a place where I would traditionally thrive.
So this is interesting, because my stuff, because of where it comes from, is very all systems. So I'm either in flow or everything is out of flow, and it's not really contextual. What you're describing is, sometimes in that setting you are fine, sometimes in that same setting you are not. Do you have any idea of what the unifying characteristics of the times when you are not are?
Yes. And this is something that comes up with us all the time. If I don't know all of the things, if I can't pivot with confidence in the situation, like if something goes wrong, I need, or what I feel like I need, is to be able to pivot with just as much knowledge as the original. Like, I need to have every tributary that I could accidentally go down covered. And if I don't have those covered, I feel vulnerable. And if I'm vulnerable, my nervous system picks up on that. It's like, no,
then freeze.
And then it freezes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many interesting things to go into there. One, how were you at improv? Like, was improv a thing or not for you?
Very interesting. So I studied improv throughout college. I loved improv. And then...
Yes, and? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of my very, very, very first auditions in LA was for an improv show. It was a new improv show coming up. And I was like, this is great. I've been teaching improv. I've done it like the past 3 years consistently. In my master's program, improv is going to be cake. And I got up and literally froze. And I was like, what is happening? And all of my my reality just started to break down in the moment. And it happened twice, because they gave me another chance to do the same thing. And I was so triggered and such in a trauma that I couldn't even think. I was like blank.
Twice on the same day.
Yeah. Which kind of goes back to the,
do you think that was because
you know what you're doing when you're teaching it or in your little kind of grad school setting or your master's or that, but suddenly you're in it and there's a consequence, i.e. there's a job at the end of it.
Job.
That
right.
kind of blows the kind of naturalness out.
Yes. And what was interesting is we were playing a game that I wasn't familiar with. And because I wasn't familiar with the game,
you couldn't improvise within the structure because you didn't know the structure.
Correct.
And this is fascinating because this speaks so much to why coaches need to know more, because most coaches would coach Brace into not needing the infrastructure. It's literally the default. It's kind of what we think. It's like, oh, well, okay, like you need the structure to feel safe. How about feeling safe when there's no structure? And try and coach you into that. There's an element to which that has value. The truth of Brace's human design is that he's a 1-4. So he absolutely needs, particularly psychologically, in your brain, the structure before you feel safe externalizing to your community and your network. So knowing that, it's about understanding how far down this safety without structure track do you actually get to go? And it isn't ever going to be to the point of a 4-6, which is me. Like I can pivot on a dime. Like, and I know enough, and I'm also like, I can make enough up that I don't really need to know it all. And I've got very few ones in my design. I am way more happy to move fast and break things, as you might tell from all of our website links, than I am like, oh no, every single button needs to have been pressed. We need to have a privacy policy and we need to have everything in place. Like, that's not my approach. Whereas Brace's approach is, and there's a line for this, and I will go into a bit more detail, but it's like, as in there's a line, there's a level, not a human design line. But Brace's approach has to be, hang on, I need to get my head around the system. Hang on, I need to get my head around the system. And the instinct there would be, okay, so whenever Brace sees a system that he needs to get his head around, which make all the time in the world for Brace to get his head around a system before he actually actions the thing. And this is where you tie the human design type in, so you're manifesting this. And you have to go, okay, yes, you have to get your head around the system first before you externalize and network, essentially. But you have to love getting your head around the system. You have to manifest into the system, not feel, oh my God, I need to understand the system and it's super drudgery and it's like horrendous and horrific. And so that's how to tie human design type, human design profile line, and the evolution that they're trying to make as a kind of person within that. Does that make sense for you? It's like,
it does. It absolutely does. And that goes into so many different areas of my life, not just improv, audition, you know, it's literally everything.
Did you find, out of interest, the study of acting, like, fascinating, got your energy going, or was it like an uphill battle because you were trying to find the way to do it? What was your kind of vibe with it?
So my experience in my life, and it's so, I love that we're talking about this. My mother has said for years, she said, there was something about you when you were younger, is like the stage, like creative, it was effortless. And then all of a sudden there was like this structure and this is how to do it. And these are the techniques. And those things almost suffocated my natural ability.
Oh, thanks,
because
Mom.
maybe say again.
I said, oh, thanks, Mom.
Well, and she was just making an observation because she was trying to figure out like where the disconnect was happening, but there was no answer. So I was left with, okay, was my training kind of sabotaging my natural ability? Was it the training, or was it myself and how I related to the training?
And that's fascinating because training, I love that we're talking about this. So in my eyes, as the founder of an academy, training should show you what's possible and the ways to move within the system, not how to do it. So training should expand the roadmap and show you the map of the territory, not give you tram lines. And that's
right, because then there's a wrong way to do it, and
precisely
the wrong way, I have to do it the right way.
The right way.
Yes.
And that for
otherwise
us,
I feel like an idiot in front of everybody. Right.
And for force, there's a degree of actually the tribe is where we live. Like we have to be safe within our network. So that's always going to be there. So a little bit of my, oh my God, did I send the wrong email? Did I send the wrong text messages? Because the network is everything to me. And I don't want to burn the bridges in the network. And again, back to what's possible for us as human beings, I'm never going to lose that. I'm always going to want to be part of the network. Can I step into my role as a role model, which is what we were speaking about earlier, and actually take a step back and actually go, actually, the network will come to me. I don't need to worry over every little tiny word in a text message, because I probably don't need the word in a text message fussy people in my network. And stepping into that role and model energy is a different thing. But for the that networking need is really important. But I think for you, there is this kind of right and wrong is a real stressor. It's a real stressor for manifestors. It's like if you feel like there's tram lines within which your aim has to be, you cannot manifest. Manifest is, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going over here. It's like it has to be outside the bounds. So a lot of my consideration as I'm designing our curriculum, and we did it before actually, because we were coaching one another, and there was a moment where there was a teaching moment, and there was stuff that I could kind of take and go, oh, great, we need to actually make sure we cover this in the curriculum. But it isn't, this is the way to do this. This happened in a coaching container in a setting, and this is the way, as Brace will attest to. It's like, well, you could go in this direction and this direction, and maybe this direction, and then you go in this direction, and then, because there's a million and one options. There is no one right way to do this, and there's no one right way to do acting, particularly. There's always technique, but technique should expand and improve on your natural talent, rather than say, okay, that natural resource that you think you have, well, funnel it in this very specific way, please.
So do you think my attachment to right and wrong and how I define those is limiting my ability to move freely within a given system set out by something on the outside of myself?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it does it with way more people than we think. I think it's societal, and I think this stuff is often handed down through society and generations. It's not Brace wanted to be a good boy from the beginning, so always had to get it right. It's normally Brace suffered the consequences from getting it wrong in the societal dynamics that you grew up in. And that, again, can be generational. Like, I mean, there were much less flex within family units and upbringing like that when we were younger. Yeah. For
myself, and for those of our audience out there who are like, oh yeah, really resonating with this, is it really just about redefining for myself what right and wrong actually are, not letting something outside of myself define that's right, that is wrong, redefining it for myself and uniquely to me and how I move through the world, which, human design can help me design that definition for myself.
Yeah, I think that's an element of it. And I think there's also an element for people like yourself where recognizing where there isn't a right and wrong. So, and there will be, like in coaching, you can absolutely get it wrong, but there are a million and one ways to get it right. So that I think there are, in acting, same, like you can get it wrong by being totally inauthentic and like not conveying the role and the character, but there are also a million and one ways to get it right. There's a million and one ways.
And I love that you're saying it like this, because I mean, just going back to the improv audition, I could have said anything.
Right, you could have gone,
and it would have been.
Know the rules of this game. I'm not playing anymore. And guess what would happen? You've changed the entire thing.
Exactly. Like I literally could have said anything at all. They were literally like, come up with a your mama joke on the fly. Do you know what the your mama jokes are?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you had the mama jokes in the UK.
Well, we have a lot of American television, so yes, we do know what your mama jokes are.
Rock and roll. Very good. I literally could have said anything, but because I was so stuck in I have to say the right answer, and I was defining the right answer in the wrong way.
In other people's context. And this is the
Correct,
game
according to what
within-
someone else, yeah.
and the rules that they'd set up. And I think what manifestors don't recognize often enough is they can break the rules. Because the thing with improv is like, you get to say anything, that's the rule. The rule isn't we're playing a game that you have to know the structure of with improv. The rule is you make it up as you go along and everyone else has to follow you. So if you'd have gone, I don't know the rules of this game and I am not playing this stupid thing anymore, and thrown whatever, I don't know what the game was, but like thrown cards down on the table or whatever it is, you've created a very interesting dynamic in which someone's going to say something and you've got a very easy joke back at them. And it's just like, but because somebody had said to you, you're playing this game, you assumed you had to keep playing the game.
There
That's
are
not the
rules
rule
to
of
the game
improv.
that is, especially in improv of all things. What a wonderful example. It's like literally the game where anything goes
and everyone has to follow you.
You shut yourself off.
Right.
Race,
and that's
hilarious.
That's literally the definition of what people do with life. And like, this is why I kind of love my job, because I get to blow people's minds with what's possible. So when I get people to write their 5-year out thing, and I don't do this all the time, but sometimes it helps people to really get structure. The goal of those writing that, like where I'm going to be in 5 years, you literally write the map of your day in 5 years time. And you start with, I woke up in the morning, and you say to your clients, no, granular. Like I woke up on the right-hand side of the bed with the sun peeping through the blinds. And it's like, when you do this, you realize how many micro decisions and how many givens you put up with in a day. So if you wake up on the right-hand side of the bed, but you normally sleep on the left because your partner sleeps on the right, what's happened in those 5 years? Have you swapped sides? Have you separated? Are you with a different partner? Like, there's so many questions. And the one that I love to give is, I reach for my glasses on the bedside table. It's like, do you, or have you had laser surgery in those 5 years? So you don't need your glasses. And it's like, getting people to do this exercise isn't about manifestation and making a 5-year dream come true. It's about how many things in your life are you just not questioning because you've just fallen into the habit of it. And it's
this is the way it is.
Yeah. And it's what we were saying before about, I can't remember whether this is on podcast or off podcast, but it's like, there is stuff that's trauma. Oh, it's off podcast. There's stuff that is a sabotage pattern that is built up by trauma, that is actually something that you need to work on. And whether you're trauma trained and you're working on the trauma, whether you're trauma aware and you're working as trauma informed and you're working on the kind of symptoms of the trauma, it's trauma. But there's also other stuff which is just habit and laziness. And people haven't thought about the fact that they don't need to shop at Ralph's, they can shop at Whole Foods because they've now got the bank balance. It's like, but they don't up level because they haven't thought about it. And it's like, when you do this 5-year exercise, it's like, how many tolerations do you have, is another way to say it. How many things are you just like giving a pass in your life because you haven't realized that you can throw absolutely every rule you've ever known out the window. It's like when I came here, my coach said to me, I don't have an actual house, you know. And I was like, what, you mean like detached? And he said, yeah, even with stairs. And I was like, am I an adult who's actually paying my own rent and has been for a very long time? Yes. And it's so interesting what we just assume we have to settle for, from the place that we live to the conversations that we have, to the people that we choose to socialize with, to the patterns that we choose to portray. And it's like, if we can drop judgment so that we're not sitting there going, oh, I'm such a terrible person because every time I'm in that situation, I choke. And we go, what is coming up for me in that situation? Like, what is it? And do I have to do it? Is it, oh my God, there's a deep memory? And I think a lot of actors, as we were saying before we started recording, a lot of actors have a lot of really traumatic memories of having really terrible experiences in theatre, in like messing up in rehearsals and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're literally putting ourselves out there every time
as somebody
to be judged.
And this is the thing about actors. It's like, you're not being you. And it's like, it's so confusing because you're being criticized for not being somebody else well enough. Which is why I love how many actors get into coaching, because it's like they get into acting because they're like,
you know what's so funny? And I'm sorry to interrupt,
no.
but one of my first like official reviews, the person reviewing me was like, he spit too much. Like I was spitting while I was talking on stage, and it was like he spit, and I was like, well, when you were saying that, I was like, maybe my character was just
maybe it was very method of you, and you'd actually thought that into the role. And it's a funny situation where rejection is the theme of an actor's life, and it's really hard. There has to be an off-ramp to auditioning as a regular actor, because you have developed such a thick skin against rejection that you're not actually integrated into society very well. This sounds really critical, but that was a bit extreme. I apologize for it. But it is like you're so used to rejection that you anticipate it. That too is a survival response. You learn that from audition to audition, from even the auditions that you don't get, you just put your paperwork in, they made a decision on your face they didn't like. It's like you habituate your experience with rejection, so you come to expect it. And again, it's not sabotage, it's your preemptive strike. So I'm going to just anticipate rejection so it don't feel the pain when I don't get it, because I was never going to get it anyway, because everyone gets rejected. So you get into that role, and then you off ramp from the acting, and you're not auditioning anymore, and you expect everyone else in the world to reject you. It's like, if I don't do this right, people are going to reject me. And I think there's a little bit of this in like your patterning and stuff like that. I don't think it's just
absolutely
auditions. I think it's like you're so used to rejection. And this isn't because Brace was a terrible actor, just to be super clear for the public out there. It's not Brace always got rejected. It's 99.9% of actors get rejected from 90% of the jobs they ever go for. It's just it's the industry. And so it just is this thing where you have to develop what we call a thick skin. It's not a thick skin, it's a trauma response. And it's a pattern that you hold on to defend yourself. And the interesting thing for me in all of this is that, you know, the criticism when you get rejected, which actors never remember, is you weren't great at faking it. Not you are not a good actor, just like you were not really great at completely bullshitting. And it's just like, you should take rejection as a point of pride. I wasn't bad enough at being a human that I didn't get that. It's just like, it should, like, you should flip the whole industry.
That's so fun. You know what? We should take that to like groups of actors like all over LA and New York and Chicago and Atlanta and just tell that story. Man, people would be like, oh my God, I've been wasting so much energy thinking this or that about myself.
Right. And it's like, funny to me because the most
it makes it so lighter. So much lighter.
Well, and the most famous actors that we have, in my opinion, tend to get super famous by playing roles that are self-adjacent. So if I look at Tom Cruise, absolutely. He plays Tom Cruise in every movie.
In every movie.
And same with somebody like
Tom
Sandra
Cruise
Bullock.
Himself is so fascinating.
Right.
It's like,
and a lot funnier than you give him credit for from the movies. But like Sandra Bullock is another great example in a completely different way. She's very Sandra Bullock adjacent when she's doing stuff. She can do funnier, but Sandra Bullock herself will have funny things, and she can do like lawyery. But this is the funny thing that people like. It just makes me laugh. Like, and even in comedy, occasionally you will get a comedy actor who's doing a cameo type where it's caricature. But if you think of Sean Hayes, great in Will and Grace, but he's basically Sean Hayes, like plus X2 sort of thing. And you're just like, acting isn't acting, it's playing people who are self-adjacent. So like
I mean, really. And those, like you said, those are some of the most successful people out there. They just,
and certainly they get successful that way. So, and that's the thing as well. It's like there are certain people who you're like, they got successful by doing the self-adjacent roles, and then they've almost got a free pass and then can like use their craft.
Yeah. Can you imagine like somebody like Jeff Goldblum playing anybody but himself? I would be sad if he tried to add anything else, because he alone is so fascinating to watch.
And you go back and watch old footage of these actors who we now know to be who they are, and it doesn't resonate. And you're like, I thought they were a good actor. Maybe they just got that way. And I think that's the interesting thing with the Harry Potter movies. So if you go back and watch the early Harry Potter movies, the acting is terrible because they were children. But actually what happened is, you look at Emma Watson, she's kind of Hermione, the Hermione from the movie. And you look at Daniel Radcliffe, and he's kind of Harry Potter. And it's not because we've confused the character with the person in our brain. It's because they transformed the role into being more of themselves over time, because they weren't trying to act. There are a few anomalies, as always. Like, I'm watching The Servant at the moment on Apple TV, and Rupert Grint was terrible at the beginning of The Servant and has got there. Like, I'm kind of finally believing him. It's taken me a long time for him not to be Ron. Is it Ron? Ron Weasley? It's testing my Harry Potter knowledge now. And then
yes. Ronald.
Yeah. And yeah, there's certain elements, but you just feel like coaching is the perfect mecca for actors. For all the therapy.
Now that we've gone on the acting
oh my goodness.
tangent.
Good luck, like, Victoria, write the show notes for this, this episode.
So sabotage.
Sabotage plus acting plus, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love, you know, kind of how we have shown a different light on sabotage. It's like sabotage can be a really good thing for people. It helps them get through life. It helps in a lot of ways.
Oh, and really lovely point there, Bryce, because I just want to say that if you know that you are sabotaging yourself in a certain area, and you've listened to this massively varied podcast, but really back on the sabotage, the first place you go naturally will be guilt, especially when you just listen to a podcast like this. And what I'd really like to encourage is to feel the guilt, because it's true, but also to recognize the reason and the intelligence behind the response. And if you can slide in alongside the guilt a teensy bit of compassion for yourself and for the human animal that you are, that is just trying to protect yourself, then you may find that something liberates within the awareness of the sabotage response. We are not saying go and change your patterns tomorrow. We are saying awareness is actually all that's necessary. Awareness plus compassion is like a ninja package of self-care.
Lovely. 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 I hope this resonated with many of you. I think it's a thing that we don't necessarily dive into, because then we have to face certain parts of ourselves that have actually helped us out for a long time.
Oh, such a good point, Bryce. Yes, absolutely. And I almost said that earlier on, in terms of like, we're not supposed to see it until we're supposed to get rid of it. These things help us. Like, if you think of it instead of a pattern, think of it like a security blanket, and you'll feel much more compassion.
And then you have the liberty to decide, okay, this is something I want to start to release and transform within myself, or hold on to. Neither of those answers are the wrong thing, as long as they are complementing your life and not, well, making sure that you're happy is the ultimate goal for any of us. It's like, you deserve to be happy, you deserve joy. And if these sabotage patterns are not creating joy in your life, then you get to work that. You get to talk to people, you get to educate yourself and dive in and get deep. And that's one of the things we want to do, and support people in those types of evolutions within the self.
And actually, you know, just joining our workshop, And yes, the
it
workshop
would be
is
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. Like the workshop is kind of an on-ramp to the coach training, but it's not for coaches. We are like directing it to people to literally create their own roadmap to holistic integrative transformation. And what we're going to do as a secondary is demonstrate to the coaches that show up how they can guide their clients to this, because it isn't a simple like roadmap for a coach, because there is a lot more difference that we would do. But we are including some inner child stuff, lots of science on the nervous system, more than today. We're including all the human design stuff in more detail. We're including somatic stuff, which is super useful for this moment of freeze, when you're like, what is actually happening here when I'm about to throw myself under the bus or whatever it is. It's really like, and we will go into more of patterns of like how we sabotage, because there's things that we haven't mentioned today, like self-doubt is another way to sabotage. It's all my fault is a really good way to sabotage. You know, I'm not enough is another way to sabotage. So there's tons. But hopefully, and I didn't want to go into all the specifics today because I wanted to give enough of the thematic of the reasoning so that anyone can take their own pattern and start to work with the infrastructure underneath.
And if you need support, we're here.
We are. Yeah. We're
where would we want to guide people
for one-to-one
if somebody's looking? Sure, if people are looking for support, where are they going?
You can still email reachout@unveilenterprises.com or DM us. We will have the Alethea group up, like I say, but we don't need to manage 49,000 email addresses. So we're still at unveilenterprises.com for email addresses, reach out, applications. There's 1,000,001 things that you can find. The application to work with us, I will make sure it's in our show notes and in the link in bio in our social media profiles as well, so that if people want to work with us, they can. We both have a few slots open at this moment in time. I'm not going to be taking on masses of clients in the run up to September because I've got a bit else to do. And Brace is not going to be taking on massive clients that are going to go on ongoing because he's got a little bit else to do as well. So yes, we are probably now both offering shorter term packages than we have been in the past. Usually it's a minimum of a 3-month commitment to work with us, but we are now offering shorter term things.
Like one-offs. Yeah, one-offs, those are great.
Yeah. And I still do
your deep dives. Yeah.
They are going away in September until at least the beginning of next year, because I don't have the bandwidth to be deep diving and doing everything. So if you want a deep dive, made it sound like I was actually going diving, didn't I? If you want a deep dive, that's between now and the 9th of September. Actually, the 4th of September, because I'm heading over to LA on the 4th. If you want an immersion day, if you want an immersion day and you're in Austin, you can definitely apply for those right now. If you want an immersion day virtually, I'm still doing those. They're great to blast through things. If you go to the link in my bio on social medias, all of my kind of stuff is there.
Brilliant.
And if you want to do the coach training and you don't ever want to be a coach, you can still do that. Like, in fact, do you know what I'm going to do, Breaks? I'm going to add that as a track because I haven't put that in.
Yay.
Like, I haven't put just
you heard it here first
with us. Well, why haven't I? It's like I haven't put just study everything with us, do no coaching hours outside, and nothing that we need to review. So yeah, we will add that as a track that you can just study all the modules, be part of the cohort, be involved, do the breakout sessions, learn all the stuff. And we'll add that as a track.
That's beautiful and lovely, because I know, well, I feel strongly that there are people out there who are like, don't necessarily want to be a coach or anything, but that type of knowledge is something that I love. And it being that personalized will be epically huge for some folks out there.
Absolutely. And you know, there is there's no one who can't actually be a coach, and no obligation to become a coach, and there's no reason to pay the full fee if you don't want a career at the end of it. You know, the reason these are priced like they are is because you end the year with a career. So yeah, I will create that track. I will edit all the things accordingly. Just a few more things on my to-do list.
What? See if we can break some more links. Yes.
Oh, yeah, and I'll put the signals.
I think they just need to be broken at just as an initiation. It's like, oh, you're going to be a link for us.
Yeah. It's like all my links are third lines. They all need to go through like trial and error, bonds made and broken processes. Right,
beautiful.
Grace,
all right,
take us out.
All my beautiful, wonderful saboteurs out there, myself and Victoria included. We're going to start to use that as a loving term, because that's what we get to do here. We get to improv, and because there's no Reddit. All right, my name is Brace Harris.
My name is Victoria Fenton.
And we are
Unveil.
Stay informed with all things Unveil. Sign up for the newsletter at unveilenterprises.com/sign up.